Hey fellow tankers, it's Mobius Y here with another video for World of Tanks console. So today is the next episode in my road to the 113 Chinese Tier 10 heavy tank. We're taking a look at the Tier 8 110 with a full in-depth review. I've got two games lined up and we're going to go over the hard and soft stats of the tank using both the in-game statistic analysis as well as tanks.gg. So honestly, this video is not really one that I'm going to be too terribly happy with because the gameplay that I have selected is the only not even half decent gameplay that shows off the strengths of the 110 somewhat, but not a great deal. I was unable to get gameplay where I am bottom tier facing off against tier 10s to show off the 110's good mobility and penetration capabilities, and I wasn't really able to get decent gameplay where I'm top tier showing off the 110's really good armor profile, so on and so forth. So I'm not too happy with the two games that I got stuck with. I had a heck of a time trying to get some gameplay for about a week and a half while I grinded out the last 50,000 XP or so to research the Tier 9 Wheezy 111 Model 1.4. So this first game here on Scorpion Pass will show off the nimbleness of the 110. It's not exactly a fast heavy tank. It's definitely not very quick like, say, an FCM 30 ton. But for one that is as well armored as it is, it's fairly agile. It turns decently well. It accelerates decently well. Has a pretty respectable top speed. And it has a really good reload rate. Well, I suppose rate of fire on its gun is the phrase I want to use. The normal reload speed is 10 seconds. So with equipment and crew skills, you can cut that down to 9, 8.5 seconds, somewhere in that area. So it's actually a really respectable rate of fire. And with the alpha damage per shot that it does, this tank is actually pretty dang good at trading with medium tanks of the same tier in particular, since most of them only do about 240 alpha damage, and it still sports a very respectable and similar reload. Some medium tanks might have as quick as a 7-second reload, beating you out by just a little bit, but a lot of them have a very similar reload, not much longer than what you'll get on the 110. So basically, short version, the 110 has really good reload speed, really good penetration, both its standard rounds and its premium APCR rounds have decent penetration. They're not a huge improvement over the standard penetration. It's only about a 50 millimeter improvement in the actual penetration values between the standard AP and the premium APCR, but the penetration values are pretty good overall. The frontal armor profile of the 110 is also quite good. It's almost better than the IS-3, I want to say. Not really. The IS-3 also has a pretty good frontal armor profile, but the 110 feels like it has a much tougher hull area that is difficult to penetrate, especially at mid or even close range. The 110 really excels as a brawler tank. You need to get in fairly close, but not too close. Just far enough back where the people will have trouble penetrating your upper front plate because it's still very well sloped, but not so close, not so much so that they can easily aim downwards and penetrate you that way with good gun depression and just go right through your front plate that way, but not so far back where your lower front plate underneath the pike nose is extremely flat and vulnerable to shots from directly ahead of you. The turret armor is also pretty good. It's not the greatest. It has two little hatches on the very top on both the left and right side that people absolutely love to shoot, especially if you're hull down. Those get shot a lot when you find yourself in a strong hull down position. If people know where they're shooting, they can also hit you in the top of the turret if they're a little bit above you. But apart from that, it's a very, very tough tank frontally, especially when facing off against tanks of a similar tier. As I said, its firepower is quite good. Its mobility is quite good. There's just a lot of nice things going on about this tank. There's a reason this tank is such a primary pick in Tier 8 competitions, especially on urban-style maps. So this game is less than 4 minutes in. It's already over for me. There's 11 minutes and 6 seconds left on the clock, and I'm already dead, so we're going to skip to the score screen. I ended that game with 10 penetrations, racking up 2,600 damage, 3 tanks destroyed. Decent game, I guess. It was quick, and the only thing it really showcased was that this tank can keep up with a medium tank that is trying to circle you, and it will actually out-trade with it. Me and the STA1, had very similar reload speeds, but because the 110 had the higher alpha damage at 320 as opposed to only 240, I was able to easily out-trade against the STA1 trying to circle me. And that's one of the strengths of the 110 that comes from having a smaller caliber gun as opposed to the IS-3. The IS-3's saving grace in its firepower is that it has really good penetration. It's actually a little bit better than the 110s with its standard AP round. It has 10 millimeters more penetration, and it does 390 alpha damage, so it's a big boomstick. But the downside of that is that it has at least 2 to 3 seconds of a longer reload speed. So where the IS-3 can poke out and trade against a medium tank, the medium tank still has enough time to pull forward and try and pop a shot off on the IS-3, getting a 2-for-1 trade, whereas the 110 will reload in time to shoot that medium tank that's trying to rush out and get a second shot in before you reload. That is one of the 110's major strengths, in my personal opinion. So let's go ahead and start off by taking a look at the packages of the 110. Now, this stock package on the 110, you start off with a 122mm 37-122 JT gun. This is a pretty low quality 122mm gun, but you should not be on the stock package for very long, if at all, because the first upgrade is a radio, engine, and gun upgrade that are all researched from the IS-2. You get all these modules researched from the IS-2 being fully upgraded 1 tier prior, so this very first package should require 0 XP, even if you have not done other Chinese lines previously. Now, the second package upgrade, that's when you get the 110's track upgrade as well as the turret upgrade, sporting a much stronger turret. But you're still stuck with the 122mm D25T, so you still have a big boomstick that hits pretty hard for 390 damage, but it only has 175mm of penetration, so it might be a bit of a struggle. And the final package gives you the gun upgrade where you get the 100mm 62-100T. This is really good gun, sports really good penetration values, decent gun handling, and it's actually one of the top guns that is used on the Wheezy 120 Tier 9 medium tank. It's actually the second last package where you research the 100mm 62-100T. So if you have previously done the Chinese medium tank line, this gun will already be researched for you if you fully upgraded the Wheezy 120. So the final package on the 110 should require 0 XP if you're upgrading from that second to last package, if you have done the medium line. If not, it will cost a significant amount of XP. I believe it's about 60,000 to fully upgrade the 110. So let's take a look at some of the hard stats now. The 110 has a fairly weak engine for its size. It only has 580 horsepower. The comparable IS-3 has 700 horsepower engine. So the power to weight ratio on the 110 is not as good as the IS-3, but the 110 actually still has pretty decent acceleration. And if you do manage to get this tank, you'll experience that in gameplay. The rate of fire is 6 rounds per minute. Approximately 10-second reload speed is the base amount. As I said, you can increase your rate of fire and decrease the reload speed by throwing on equipment like gun rammer and training certain crew skills like Brothers in Arms. As I said, the penetration values are really good for a Tier 8 heavy tank. The standard AP rounds have 215 millimeters of penetration. That will go through the front of a lot of tanks at your tier, just about anything. As a matter of fact, IS-3s at certain spots, you can penetrate them pretty easily, even in the top of the turret. KV-5s, which there are a lot of these days because of the free Gory Niche giveaway recently for Halloween, it could go through the front of KV-5s very easily, even at the front of the turret where it's really flat. That it will also allow you to damage Tier 9 and Tier 10 tanks. Something like an STI will be easily penetrated even in the side of the hull or the side of the turret. Even an E100 in the turret side will be penetrated and damaged from a shot with this gun. And the premium APCR rounds have 265 millimeters of penetration. That is the exact same as a premium APCR round with the IS-3. So they have the same premium APCR penetration. However, the 110 has 10 millimeters less penetration with the standard AP round. And both of those rounds do 320 alpha damage, the same as a T-32 with its top 105 millimeter gun. So the same amount of damage, not a huge amount of alpha damage, but most Sorry, more than most medium tanks, so you should be able to outtrade with them. The high explosive rounds only have 50 millimeters of penetration and deal 420 alpha damage. So if you like using high explosive for really thinly armored opponents like Borsigs or the new Swedish TDs, for example, you can definitely mount some high explosive rounds to increase the damage that you will deal to them. Now, two of the other aspects that I like about the 110 is the aim time and the accuracy. The aim time is 2.9, which is quite a bit better than the IS-3s. I believe the IS-3 is about 3.2, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't know the exact value off the top of my head right now, but it's definitely worse. It's above the 3.0 mark on the IS-3. So this thing aims in more quickly, and the accuracy is 0.38. So it's pretty respectable. It's not great, but it's pretty respectable. The traverse speed on the 110 with its fully upgraded tracks is 30 degrees per second. So that is very respectable on a heavy tank. You could see in the previous gameplay there, I was able to turn my chassis in order to keep my gun on the STA-1 that tried circling me. No problem. The upgraded turret is the T10 turret. Its frontal armor profile is 201 millimeters, but that's only in certain areas. Its side armor is 148 millimeters, and its rear is 50 millimeters. We'll go over a detailed armor profile on tanks.gg a little bit later to show you exactly where those thicker armor plates are, where to shoot it and where not to shoot it. The turret traverse is 26 degrees per second, so it's actually less than the track traverse, so you get a total of 56 degrees per second with both track and turret traverse if you're trying to turn around and put your gun on target. And the view range is a very respectable 380 meters. That's nothing great, but it's pretty good for a tier 8 heavy tank. The IS-3s is only 350, so you'll have a much easier time spotting enemies that are spotting you. Just keep in mind, though, that you will get outspotted by things like really small light tanks and some medium tanks that mount things like coated optics, or even heavy tanks that just have a higher view range than you. The radio has a signal range of 750 meters, but that's kind of to be expected. Nothing new going on there. So we're going to take a look now at the supplies and equipment that I used on the 110 to make it work for me. Now, the 110 is a competitive tank, so I did not mount any high explosive rounds when I was grinding for it. I mounted nothing but AP and APCR, and as I said, because this is a competitive tank used in Tier 8 competitions, I threw on a lot of APCR just to leave it there, because I don't really plan to be playing the 110 a heck of a lot in public matches once I was done grinding it. So I wanted the supply of APCR to be adequate for competitions, and 25 AP rounds is just fine. I didn't really feel it was necessary mounting any high explosive because the extra time to simply switch between rounds, because I might get a shot on this thinly armored target like this Borsig or some crap like that for an extra potential 100 damage. I didn't really feel was worth it. I could simply just shoot the guy, then reload in barely eight and a half seconds, not even, and just shoot him again for reliable damage no matter what. For consumables, large repair kit, large first aid kit, automatic fire extinguisher. I highly recommend using a large first aid kit on this, even if you do not like to, because the crew members, particularly the driver and even the loader, can get killed pretty easily if people shoot you in the right place, and the automatic fire extinguisher is an absolute must. Helps prevent fires and also puts them out immediately if your tank is set on fire. Now, for equipment, it's pretty standard for a heavy tank. I threw on a large caliber tank gun rammer, vertical stabilizer, and improved ventilation. So to reduce the reload speed as much as possible, large caliber tank gun rammer and improved ventilation helps improve that. And to improve the gun handling, vertical stabilizer and improved ventilation help improve those as well. The aim time wasn't so terrible, so I didn't really feel the need to mount an enhanced gunling drive, and besides, a vertical stabilizer is always better than an enhanced gunling drive anyways. If there was other equipment to mount on this tank, I don't really think there would be anything terribly wise, aside from maybe coated optics. If you really want to amp up your own view range, you could either drop the vertical stabilizer and keep vents and optics to maximize your possible view range with this tank, or you could drop the improved ventilation in order to also lower your reload speed a bit, but also keep some of the best gun handling you can have with the vertical stabilizer. The only other option might be toolbox if you don't have repairs trained on your crew, but apart from that, I don't really recommend anything aside from, possibly wet ammo rack, but that's kind of wasting a slot to try and prevent more damage to your ammo rack. I don't really feel it's worth it. Crew skills. When I was playing the 110, I finished grinding out the Brothers in Arms crew skill, and it actually shaved off about 0.25 seconds on the reload, roughly, about a quarter of a second on the reload. So the gun was definitely shooting more quickly once I finished training that. But apart from that, I only had repairs in 6th Sense, and Mentor doesn't really affect the performance of the tank, but repairs in 6th Sense were absolutely handy as I played out on this tank. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the soft stats in comparison to the IS-3 on tanks.gg as we leave the World of Tanks console garage. Okay, so here you are on tanks.gg taking a look at the Chinese 110 Tier 8 heavy tank. So frontally, you can see that there was those 201 millimeters of armor that I mentioned. Before I forget, keep in mind that these are PC stats. The tanks.gg uses the statistics and information directly from the PC version of the game. So this information from tanks.gg might not be 100% accurate in line with the console version of the game, but it definitely gives you a really good idea of how tanks play, where their armor is strongest, where their armor is weakest, what they're good at, what they're bad at, etc., etc. It gives a much more detailed armor profile than the in-game armor viewer that we have for World of Tanks console. So just wanted to get that across. So the 201 millimeters that I mentioned, looking at the hard stats from the game, is just around the gun mantlet and the bottom parts of the turret. So that's where the thickest armor is on the turret, and it does make it quite protective. There are some spots where really high penetration guns, things like TDs or even fully upgraded Tier 9 heavy tanks, will have little difficulty penetrating. As the turret, as you go up the sides of the turret, the armor plating gets thinner, but it's more rounded, so they'll still have some difficulty penetrating it. What's really nice about the 110 is that you have 120 millimeter thick frontal armor, which is very difficult to penetrate for a lot of Tier 8 tanks because it's about 250, 260 effective when you're pointing right at them and coming down, bearing down hard on them. And the lower plate is 110 millimeters thick. As you can see here, its effective armor is less than 200 from a distance, but as people get closer and they have to aim more down, that lower plate gets harder and harder to penetrate. However, your upper plate gets easier and easier to penetrate. So you got to find the nice middle ground. About 80, 100 meters away is really nice on flat terrain and urban environments when you're playing the 110. That's really where this tank really does shine. As I said, the hatches on the top, they're very easy to penetrate if somebody is able to actually hit them. It does require a really accurate gun and a lot of aiming in, but if they hit them, it's a very easy penetration that will cause you some damage. And the top of the turret, if somebody's looking down at you, the tops of the turret, especially around the hatches, very easy to penetrate. So as you can see, the 110 has a pike nose just like the IS-3, so if you find yourself side scraping, you'll find that these plates here, just on the shoulders, they are a lot thinner at those angles, so people who do know what they're doing, they will not shoot these pieces of side armor here. They will, in fact, shoot you right here in this plate. A lot of people don't do that. They shoot you in the tracks, and the tracks absorb it. You'll find that on the sides of the 110, it's only 60 millimeters behind the tracks, so pretty easy to penetrate. 80 millimeters total with the tracks. Above that is 90 millimeters, and it's sloped just a little bit, so you might get some troll bounces there. Don't shoot there if you're trying to circle strafe this thing with the medium tank. You want to shoot downwards into the lower areas where the tracks are. Obviously, the rear of the tank is very weak. It's only a 60 millimeter plate, easy to damage the engine from the back there. And then the turret itself, very easy to damage from the back. Obviously, good place to shoot it is here on the side of the turret because you've got both the loader and the ammo rack in these areas of the turret. So if you've got a 110 on the right hand side, you can shoot it in that area. Try and shoot it there; it'll really cripple its reload speed. So we'll take a look at some of the stats and compare it to the IS-3 Tier 8. Tier 8 Russian heavy tank, excuse me. So the 110 does sport better damage per minute than the IS-3, largely because of that better reload speed, even though the damage is less per shot. The penetration, as I said, is 10 millimeters less exactly. The reload time is better. It says on here it's 9.59, but it's exactly 10 seconds on console version, so the rate of fire is obviously better. Dispersion, this is incorrect. This is the PC value. It's 0.38 on console, so that is not correct. And the dispersion values when moving, traversing the tank, traversing the turret, or after shooting are supposedly worse than the IS-3, but again, those are PC stats, so that might not be accurate. Those might not be accurate to console. You do get more ammo than the IS-3, which is really nice, so that gives you a better overall potential damage every single game. Top speed is slightly better by 2 kilometers an hour, so this thing is quite nimble, even though it has a worse power to weight ratio because of the lower horsepower engine, it can still boot around a map pretty well. It's still fairly nimble. You got much better traverse rates on medium terrain because your tank traverse is roughly the same. It's 30 degrees on console, as we saw earlier, but your terrain resistances are quite a bit better on medium terrain, so that shouldn't be a problem. Amazingly, you have 1 degree better gun depression than the IS-3, which is just funny to look at, because the IS-3 is really not known for its gun depression, and neither are Chinese tanks whatsoever. But that's a detailed look on tanks.gg at the Chinese tanks. We're going to go ahead and take a look at where the modules and crew are located using images from wotinfo.net. Okay, so here we are looking at the front of the IS-3. As you can see, the ammo rack is damageable from the front on those shoulder parts that I mentioned, so people who know where to shoot, they will hit you there and damage your ammo rack when you are side scraping. And as mentioned, that hatch, especially the one on the left, is a weak point, and if people are able to get close enough to shoot down at that little driver's hatch in the very middle, it is actually a weak point to shoot at as well. The left side of the 110, again, you can see that ammo rack kind of on the left shoulder there. Hit that if possible. It's easier to damage when you're shooting downwards at it. No problem whatsoever there. Beneath that, near the front drive wheel, is where fuel tank is. There's a small red zone there. You can't tell that it's a fuel tank, though, because the icon's hidden, but you can set the 110 on fire by shooting it into that area. You've got the gunner at the front of the turret. The commander is right behind him, underneath that left hatch that likes to get shot at a lot, so he can get injured pretty easily, especially if somebody is shooting at you from the left side. And the engine encompasses the very back of the tank in the hull area, very easily damaged if somebody is able to get around on your side, especially behind you. The rear of the 110, very easy to penetrate both in the turret and in the hull, and of course in the very middle of the hull area you can damage the engine module, really hurting this thing's mobility or possibly setting it on fire. And the right side of the turret has more ammo count, so be sure to shoot in that area if you are going for a turret shot. The right side of the 110, very similar to the left side. You got fuel tanks in the very front behind the drive wheel. You've got more ammo rack on the right shoulder just beneath the turret. You've got engine deck in the very back of the hull, and the entire right side of the turret is either where the loader sits, so he'll either get injured with a shot in that area, or ammo rack, and that will get damaged if it gets shot in that area. Either way, the reload speed of the 110 will be crippled if you're able to damage either one of those by shooting in that area. So it's very important that you maintain your frontal profile towards your opponents when you're playing the 110. You need to do that as much as possible, obviously. It goes without saying, but just remember that because of that pike nose, if you find yourself angling too far, that it's very easy to penetrate your upper front plate, which is where your strongest armor is. So just be sure to keep that pointed towards the enemy if you find yourself in a one-on-one engagement. Obviously, in a side scrape position, you don't really have much choice. So I've got a second battle here on Northwest. It's another Tier 9 game, but there's not very many Tier 9s on either team, so I was pseudo top tier. Again, I didn't really feel this was a tank that really shows off. I didn't really feel that this was a game that shows off the tank's strengths as good as I wanted it to, but it does a pretty decent job of it. So right at the start of the game here, I like going to the south side on Northwest, all the way down kind of, not necessarily into the H9 area, but more into the kind of G8 area. That way, if people are coming on that top section, I can meet them head on and stall their advance. Or if it turns out that nobody's really gone up there and most of the push is coming at the very bottom and they've come down the J line or the 9 line, I can support that by either poking out and shooting downwards, or I can actually reposition myself by going from the higher terrain to the lower terrain. It's a lot easier to reposition going from higher terrain to lower terrain than it is the other way around. The 110 has a major flaw with its poor horsepower and climbing hills, so that is not really something you want to put yourself in. So a map, for example, a map like Himmelsdorf, you don't really want to drive up the hill to try and fight it out at the top of the map in a public match, because it will take you a while to get there, and you'll find that it's just really difficult getting the 110 in a good position up in that area anyways. But here we are, a little over a minute into the game now. 13 minutes, 50 seconds left on the clock. Nothing's happened so far. We're still just trying to get into position. I was going to side scrape off this rock, but we had 3 other tanks pull up there, so I decided I don't need to be there, and we hadn't seen anybody yet. So I'm going to reposition myself down where we saw a tank, point my turret over there just in case somebody does spot me. They'll have a bit of a tougher time penetrating me, but there's nobody over there, and there's lots of tanks coming down here. So poking out, getting a shot on the Pershing. Gorianich tries to poke around. He shoots one on the move and only damages my track. So in return, I put a shot right into his lower plate. Unfortunately, it was a very, very well-angled lower plate, so that did not penetrate. I should have gone for up near the turret, like that shot there, for example. That's what I loved about the 110. It is a really good gun. 250 millimeters of penetration on a tier 8 heavy tank. It's solid. It'll go through even some strong points, especially with some points of flat armor on various tanks, like the KV-5, for example. Flat pieces of armor, they just get torn right through. Poor shot on the Gorianich right there. That's hence why I pinged the great shot. So I was a little concerned about the Tiger II poking out. He was poking out pretty much side on to us. So I knew if he came out even further, it would be easy shots into the side of his hull, able to whittle down his HP even more. And he's got a better performing gun than the Gorianich's, so he was my bigger concern at this point. So he pokes out again for a shot. He takes a shot, and I put one in the top of his turret, getting my 4th penetration this game. So not a heck of a lot's happened. There's some brawling going on. People are trading shots, but I myself am just trying not to get in the way of my teammates. Unfortunately, I think I might have caused my teammate behind me to get smashed by that artillery. There's 3 of us in the same bloody corner, so just an easy target for artillery to pop a shot off down into one of us. Shooting at the R2-D2 of the Gorianich. Does no damage. I hit the outside of it where it's really well sloped away from my gun, so there was no penetration there. And he was able to put one through my front drive wheel, finally being able to damage me. In return, I put one through his R2-D2, so trying to line up one more shot through the front of this Gorianich's turret in order to take him out of the game. But the Pershing beats me to it, so there's just a couple tanks left. That Tiger II that was extremely low health, he's pulling way back. He's not trying to stick around and brawl it out with us. There's still an STI behind us. He's the last one down there on that corner. Poking out, there's an AT-15. Puts a shot through my front. I try to retaliate. Poorly aimed shot, though. Not sure what I was going for there. Shouldn't have even bothered. This T-29 takes up a good spot, but he turns his turret to me, so I'm able to put one through the side of his turret. No problem. And at this point, I'm deciding, do I press on the AT-15 and the Tiger II, or do I need to help with the STI? Right now, I felt the STI was actually a bigger threat, so I tried to get myself a bit unspotted before figuring out what I want to do here. He's still pushing in. The AT-15 and Tiger II are simply way back there. They'd be able to do a lot of damage to me before I could close the gap on them, so I decided I'm going to pull back here, try and stay out of sight from that TD that's on the higher ground above me, and try and get some help in on this STI. I have no idea how that shot hit him. I really don't. He was not even in the center of my reticule. Obviously, the shot went low and hit him in the side of the turret and penetrated him for damage. So, getting really lucky with that shot on the STI, but I had an APCR round loaded, so he basically had his butt and his side turned towards me. Unless I hit him at a really obscure angle or I hit him in the track that it would absorb it, there was no way that I was not going to be able to finish off that STI. So, taking out a really major threat from the game. Still pondering my options here. There's a T-32 way in the back, but he's pulling back towards their flag. The Tiger 88 on the top side, I did not want to deal with that frontally, as that thing would just tear through all of my HP. And I've already lost about a third in the brawl that went on down low here. So going after these guys, the Tiger II gets unspotted. Looked like he was running away, so I loaded an APCR round for the AT-15. Shot one on the move. Didn't go through. Hit him at a really obscure angle. No real surprise there. I just wanted to close the gap. He tries to put one in me. My tracks absorb it, and I respond by putting one through the weak point in the top right of the AT-15. So loading back to standard AP rounds. I keep pulling forward down this side. I know I'm not going to get a shot of that T-32. Thankfully, somebody takes out the artillery. We've got a heavy tank in their base that put some pressure on their artillery, which was really nice. Unfortunately, they did have some guys on the very north end of the map that were able to go all the way through to our base. So it's at least one heavy tank and a tank destroyer, since the only tank destroyer that's spotted right now is the Tiger 88. And there's a T-44 medium tank that's up by the flag as well. So that leaves one of the heavy tanks being a Black Prince, the other one being a T-32, and the T-32 is back at their base. The T-44 is spotted close to our base, so that leaves just the Waffle Panzer, the Tier 9 Waffle Panzer 4 on our base. So pretty easy to get resetting shots on a Waffle 4. You hit it anywhere, you'll do some damage. So I wasn't too terribly concerned with being able, somebody being able to get back there and put a shot on him and buy us some time. In fact, he does get spotted. I also ping him, so I just switched back to my AP rounds. I didn't feel that the APCR was really necessary. On the way back, though, I realized this Black Prince, he's in a good spot to just do a lot of damage to me on my way there, giving him my side. So I realized that he's actually going to put his attention on me. He puts one shot into my side, and then I just turn my front towards him to give him a tougher time. Try to aim in, put a shot into him. He responds in kind. So at this point, we're just trading right now. I'm trying to wiggle my armor so that he has a bit of a tougher time penetrating me. Unfortunately, I have a bit of a tough time penetrating him because he's fairly well angled, surprisingly enough. So I'm trying to keep myself wiggling, keep myself facing towards him. I try to aim for his lower plate, put a shot into him, but it doesn't take him out. He's on a sliver of health. I low rolled quite a bit there, only 282 damage. So I aim in, try to put one more shot into him, and it goes through, finally finishing him off. So it's 3-on-3 at this point. They still have a full health T-32. We've got the Type 4 Heavy on my team heading back to the base, and the T-95E2 not only gets a reset, but is able to take out the Waffle 4. So I figure I'm going to have to abandon these guys. They're in a 2-on-1 situation over there, but I don't want this T-32 getting behind them to shoot them in the butt while they try and deal with this T-44. So I split off and try to engage in a 1-on-1 with this T-32. Not knowing where he is, I pull forward, proxy spot him. He pulls his shot off a little late, shoots the building. I put one into his lower plate. So he drives right into me. I see he's trying to look up at my hatches and get a shot there. Gives me his side. I put a shot into him. He also puts a shot into me. So he's winning the HP game, but at this point, the T-44 and the other team got taken out, and my teammates are able to put side shots in this guy now that he has been immobilized and is trying to deal with me, the Type 4, and the T-95E2. Both put shots into him and take him out of the game. So, pretty decent game there. Pulling off 5 tanks destroyed with 4,200 damage dealt. 16 total penetrations that game. Had a high caliber medal that game, but as I said, I don't really think it showed off the strengths of this tank apart from the penetration values of the gun. It did show off some of the capabilities of the armor. I was able to bounce a lot of shots, not just from the Black Prince, but also from the KV-5s. The Tiger II had some trouble. The AT-15, not both, but all of those tanks either had trouble by either shooting me into the tracks where my tracks absorbed it, or they simply bounced off the front of this tank. It is quite a well-armored tank for a Tier 8 heavy tank. So facing off similar or lower tier tanks, they'll have a serious amount of difficulty being able to penetrate you, so long as they do not have extremely high penetration boomsticks like a lot of tank destroyers do at Tier 8, for example, the Borsig or the ISU 152, tanks like that. So, as I said, I'm not too pleased with the gameplay that I got stuck with. Those were the only ones that really showed off the strengths of this tank. Largely because I wound up being bottom tier a lot and playing as a support tank due to the Tier 10 ops going on these days, and because of that I wasn't able to get any decent gameplay against Tier 10s either. So I do apologize for that, but I do hope this review was helpful and gave you a good idea of what the 110 is like. It's basically not necessarily a poor man's IS-3, but more of a thinking man's IS-3. You get a better performing gun with really similar penetration statistics that simply deals less damage, but more overall DPM. A really good frontal armor profile that also allows for some really capable side scraping, and honestly a fairly nimble heavy tank overall. That's why it's used very often on urban environments in Tier 8 competitions. So thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you in the next episode for the Tier 9 Wheezy 111 Model 1.4, continuing down the road to the Tier 10 113. This has been Mobius Y for World of Tanks console. I will see you on the battlefield or in my next video. As always, happy tanking.